I'm Bill Kassel, and this is Free Expression. This program is all about conveying the Christian message from a Catholic point of view and defending the liberty which makes it possible to do that. We examine how Catholic charitable organizations have become entangled in the welfare state, and we reflect on the life of a teenage saint. Join us, sit back, and enjoy some free expression. Catholicism has always highlighted the virtue of charity, calling upon believers to emulate Jesus in his concern for the poor. The Church itself has created schools, hospitals, missions, all intended to meet human needs at the personal grassroots level and to demonstrate the love of God and the power of the gospel. But along the way, something changed. It used to be that the primary image of Christian charity was the local parish soup kitchen or the kindly nun calling on the aged and infirm. Today, huge church-related institutions function as arms of the welfare state, distributing tax money into programs that are entirely detached from the gospel and often hostile to it. Christopher Manion is a Catholic scholar with experience in both higher education and government. He studied the evolution of Catholic human service, and he's documented the changes in a new book, Charity for Sale: Has the American Catholic Church Become Just Another NGO? Dr. Manion, thanks very much for speaking with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you, sir.
If you would, give us a little background on how the American Church has served the poor throughout its history and what's different now.
Well, the fundamental generative principle of charity is love, God's love, and our willingness voluntarily to embrace that love and reflect it and act with regard to what God's loving will guides us. Ever since Aristotle, the notion of charity, magnanimity, for instance, has been a virtue. It is a virtue right through the ages, handing off the classical tradition to Jesus, the Gospels, and throughout the 2,000 years since, we've had individuals and religious orders, an entire variety of groups like the Knights of Columbus, and looking back, the Knights of Malta. These folks put together a voluntary association-based group. The voluntary will. Charity is voluntary. It can't be forced. If you put a gun to a man's head and ask him to give you something, he might be prudent in giving it to you. But he's not being charitable, although he might forgive you. And that is indeed an act of charity, because he doesn't have to. But with that gun to his head, he has to give you what you asked for. What happened in the 20th century was a growth of the welfare state. Now, Cardinal Gibbons, on whom I spend quite a bit of time in the early chapters, Cardinal Gibbons was the primate of America. He was the voice of the church, both to Catholics and to the government and the country at large. He said, don't take any government money. I've seen it happen in Europe, and it's a mess. We are independent, and we are flourishing. We're growing. We're blossoming like a rose, he said. But as the church started to hold hands, if you will, and then embrace, and then become dependent on the federal government for its well-being financially, the church started to hit some bumps in the road. Since the 1960s, we've had terrible crises in everything across the board, from morality to vocations to marriages to the entire array of the target of Catholic teaching, which is charity, love, growth in the love of God. Government can't love. And that is the problem facing our so-called Catholic charities today that receive government money because there's a subsidiary of the government, and they are not allowed to proselytize, they call it, or evangelize, as I call it. They can't mention Jesus in any federal finance program. It's against the law. And that's where it's gotten them. Their hands are tied, their tongues are tied, and now their wallets are in trouble because their habit of accepting federal money and growing the amount of money they receive has suddenly hit the wall, and they don't have an alternative. So that what we changed from is voluntary charity to government charity. Voluntary charity works. It's your ticket to heaven. Mandatory charity isn't working for the church, and we need to find another way to go forward.
Yeah, we've really developed this entitlement idea. It's become a sort of basic expectation that people are entitled to charity with all of these government programs. And it's always seemed to me that this really denies the recipients of charity a tremendous opportunity to experience the virtue of gratitude.
That virtue, Augustine said, is the beginning of Catholic life. The difference between entitlement and gratitude is vital. When the Good Samaritan helped the man in the ditch was grateful. And the Good Samaritan was grateful and told the man, "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve a brother of Christ." That gratitude worked both ways. Now, when you go down to the welfare office, which is really an experience 20 years ago that prompted my interest in this issue in the first place, the gal walks in, "Where's my check?" I'm sitting there waiting to have an interview with the director. The gal behind the bulletproof glass says, "Sit down." Neither of them was able to exude any virtue, gratitude, or charity. One of them is doing her job, 9 to 5, and the other one is demanding that to which she has become entitled. And she doesn't know whom to thank, even if she tries.
It's often asserted that the social problems are so big that private charity can't do the job. What's your feeling about that?
That has developed over the course of, in our case, here in the United States, over the course of a little more than a century. The problem has been that there is one distinction that charity until the 20th century displayed, not proudly, but rigorously. And that is who is deserving and who is undeserving. With that distinction, in the 19th century, one of the first virtues of the charitable organization and its volunteers was to examine the person in need and discover whether that need was because the person didn't want to work or because the person was not able to. We lost that particular virtue, if you will, of prudence, making distinctions. They no longer ask at the welfare office. They say, "Okay, what's your income level? Okay, you qualify." And they don't ask about any of the other particulars of a person's personal situation, which indicate that he is or she is truly in need, and second, whether that need is temporary or permanent. When a person is ill, when a husband is out of work, that need is, we pray, temporary. But when a person has come home from the war and is immobilized, that need is permanent. And thus, so is the requirement for charity. But that distinction we now learn in the last 3 months. It is amazing how many people are on these various welfare and other government doles that are not only not qualified, but they're frauds. That is natural for the kind of distancing from the individual case of the person in need and the person who helps. And it's inescapable until you drill down back to the fundamental issue of voluntary charity, and that means that we're discovering that the need is thought to be so great because a lot of people are getting more welfare than they would if they got a job.
Yeah, right.
And, of course, since LBJ, unfortunately, and Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell point this out so vividly, and they're both black, and so they can say it, the black family was growing, and its unemployment rate was the same as whites through the 40s and early 50s. In the 60s, when LBJ started handing out money, that ruined the black family because of the handouts, the welfare programs that discouraged marriage, that discouraged husbands staying at work when they find they make more money by quitting, even though that low income would be temporary until they work their way up in the scale. But so number one, they don't keep working, and number two, they don't stay married because they realize, honey, if I move out, we'll get more welfare between us than we would if we stay married and I stay on my job.
Right.
People might lose their sense of dignity, a word we hear a lot about today, of self-respect, but they're still logical. We can make more money doing B than doing A, which is indicative of why a lot of marriages broke up.
Yeah, it's a matter of simple economic incentives. At this time, of course, we do have Elon Musk and his Doge operation looking into these questions and trying to find out what monies are being distributed legitimately and otherwise. Unfortunately, they're also raising some serious questions about whether these church-related charitable organizations are in fact encouraging actual crime, particularly in the area of subsidizing illegal immigration. How far do you think that's going to go, and is the church going to respond to that in any kind of realistic way?
Well, when I was in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I was staff director during the Reagan years for Latin America. I saw a lot of work on the ground. I went to a lot of countries, talked to a lot of bishops in the 1970s and 1980s in Latin America. Of course, the main concern in those days was tyranny and revolution. But I did visit a lot of sites where the folks in the Agriculture Department and the Agency for International Development were working on their projects and so on. What I did notice was that the Catholic relief services, for instance, often worked alongside other agencies called non-governmental organizations that were providing family planning, contraception, and even recommending abortions. As their policy, Reagan stopped that in 1984 with a Mexico City policy. In many ways, Trump expanded it, but every Democrat has suspended the Mexico City policy. And we must recall something most people today don't know. First of all, most people don't know that the Agency for International Development even exists. They know about foreign aid. Don't know much more than that. But now we know that the agency was founded in 1962 to address the dangerous growth of population in the world that would cause a third world war the way it did the Second World War, because of the German striving for Lebensraum and taking Bohemia, taking Czechoslovakia, and wanting to take the Atlantic ports. They had to expand because we need more living room. Well, both parties in the 1960s agreed that population planning should be part of this new organization, and it's been the prime mandate ever since. So when the Catholic organizations work alongside those agencies, they are funded by the same legislation. They are one part, and in fact the biggest part, of the nonprofits who benefit from the Foreign Assistance Act. And they lobby together with Planned Parenthood and others as a arm in arm when they're at the federal trough, because otherwise they have sharp elbows trying to weed each other out, and they've discovered that doesn't work. So they've allied themselves with the organizations that are pursuing that prime mandate of AID, population control. Even though they don't work at it themselves, they never criticize it. I talked about being tongue-tied. They never criticize when it comes to the immigration issue. They depended so much on the coyotes. The coyotes, and I lived in Mexico, been there, seen that. The coyotes charged $10,000 a head to bring someone to the border from Guatemala, from beyond the Darien Gap and Panama, and of course through in Mexico. 30% of the women who come are raped or assaulted. Many of the children, we know now that it's some 330,000, are trafficked and lost. The fentanyl that the coyotes bring across the border until Trump, the fentanyl kills 100,000 Americans a year. No bishop has ever publicly condemned the coyotes. Why? Because they're business partners.
Wow.
That's outrageous to this Catholic layman speaking with you today.
Is there a way out of this? It seems to me that the Catholic laity are becoming aware of this and are not at all pleased with what the bishops have done. Can they bring about enough pressure on the church as an institution to correct this situation?
That's a very good question, which I leave the end of the book. My book was written How We Got Here. Mm-hmm. Two elements of how we got here I focused on because they are seldom addressed. They've been almost forbidden questions. Number one, the role of dissent. Since Humani Vitae, the church put it in the bottom drawer. They exchanged it for social justice. They went true to their Democrat roots, and the church has Catholics. My dad was very active since the teens as a Catholic Democrat. The trouble is the bishops, through the Second World War, were 100% pro-Roosevelt, both for welfare and because they grew up Democrat. The problem is they've stayed with the party even though the party has left them. Robert F. Kennedy, in one of his speeches before the election, said, in 1848, my grandfather came from Ireland, great-grandfather, destitute, impoverished. Who took care of him? The Democrats. Well, Bobby, the bishop, did too, and he was sending the money to Ireland to get his great-grandfather over here. Please, the church and the Democrats have done good work for many, many years together, but now the Democrat has become the party of abortion. The bishops tongue-tied. You notice they never criticized not only the coyotes, they never criticized Joe Biden because he doubled the money for the border operations of the church that Trump had allowed. And they need the money. So going forward, look at Trump. He's firing people, and yes, Democrat judges are trying to stop him, and that'll be resolved one way or the other. I pray sooner rather than later, just so the resolution can come and we'll go forward in one way or another. But he can fire people. We can't fire bishops. So the laity, first of all, have to start on their knees, and secondly, on the ground. The growth and the change is going to have to come up from the bottom up.
The book is Charity for Sale. Has the American Catholic Church become just another NGO by Christopher Manion? Where can people find out more about it and perhaps buy it?
Well, the publisher is Catholics for Catholics, and their website is simple, CFORC.com. They're a great outfit that has really devoted themselves to the future. You ask about what is to be done. They are working for the future. CFORC.com/charity for sale.
Carlo Acutis was a 15-year-old Italian boy who died of leukemia in 2006. In his brief life, he demonstrated some special talents, including for music and, not unexpectedly these days, for computers. He also showed a certain sensibility of faithfulness and piety that's not really what you'd expect to find in your average teenager. Carlo was beatified by Pope Francis in 2020 and canonized in April of 2025. What made this Italian kid so special? That's the focus of a new documentary film from the Augustine Institute. Emily Mentock is executive producer of The Boy from Milan, and she's here to tell us about it. Emily, thanks for taking time to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill.
Okay, the basic question. Why was Carlo special?
Oh, that's a great question. What makes him special to us is really, why he is being held up as a saint by the church with his canonization. It was his holiness and what that looked like in his everyday life. Now, he's become quite famous as he's become known around the world for being the first millennial to be beatified and now canonized for relatable things like how he knew how to program a website or play video games. But I think what was most special about it is how his mother described it to us in the documentary, which was that he was an ordinary boy who opened the door of his heart to Jesus, and that transformed his life to be something extraordinary.
Yeah, how did he do that? What sort of behavior was notable in him?
Yeah, so he had a great love for the Eucharist. That's another thing that he's become quite known for, especially in this time of Eucharistic revival in the United States. Since the day of his first communion, he went to daily Mass and made a daily holy hour, almost every single day of his life. And I think that shows his great love for Jesus. But then he took that love for Jesus and put it into practice in his daily life. He's known also for helping people on the streets of Milan. He would take his allowance that he received from his parents, kind of a normal kid thing, and he would use it to buy sleeping bags or clothes or food for people in need. And he chose to do this completely on his own as a very young boy, starting at the age of 9. And he's also just a very normal kid who would be playful and joyful with his friends while doing everything he could to live out the love of Jesus. So I think that what's so special about him is the great love that he had for God, that he expressed through love for people around him.
I guess we can look at him now and see him as an example to young people, but were his peers impressed with him in a positive way, or did they think that he was a little strange?
That's a great question. I guess he was a young boy, right? He died at only the age of 15. So the way his friends speak about him is that he was another normal kid like them, right? Which I think is a really remarkable thing. And it gives me a lot of encouragement in my own journey to holiness, right? Sometimes we just want to be normal people who like to have fun with our friends and do activities that we enjoy or feel called to. So I think that's a really special thing about him and makes him very relatable to us in modern times. A lot of the great saints that the church has given to us through their canonization, we have a variety of them, including many who are in religious life, many who lived so radically, like, St. Francis of Assisi or St. Maximilian Kolbe, like different saints for different times. But I think it's really nice to see the example of Carlo, who lived in modern times. He was born in 1991, that he could live a normal and joyful life.
Now, the church has a practice for establishing whether someone is worthy of blessed status or canonization. That involves miracles. Obviously, some miracles have been attributed to his intercession, right?
Yes, that's true. That is the process for canonization. So the process begins by, a diocese or religious community investigating the life of a person who has died. Usually people would have developed a devotion or want to see if this person might become a saint for the church. And so they begin a very rigorous process of looking into the life of this person, interviewing many, many people who knew them to see if they lived a life of virtue and holiness. And at that point, Usually the diocese would submit to the Holy See, if this person would be declared a servant of God. So that's the first step. And then the Holy See would do their own investigation. And if they, sort of agreed with a life of, they use the term heroic virtue, like above normal, like truly graced virtue in the person's life, they would then be declared venerable. And then the next step would be if there are at least one miracle that could be attributed that came about through the intercession of this holy person, of this venerable, then that would be, investigated first by, the local community and the local church, and then sent to the Holy See for review. One miracle that's been approved by the Holy See will get you to beatified, and the second miracle will get you to canonization, which is where we are with Carlo today.
What kinds of miracles are attributed to him?
That's a great question. I'm not an expert in the miracles. I know that most of them, for all saints and including for Carlo, usually are miraculous healings of a physical ailment that would come about through the intercession of the saint. So I'm not an expert on the miracles. Our documentary focuses on what was he like in real life. And it's part of a series where we're really exploring the question, is holiness possible today? Because it is great and inspiring, and it definitely has a role, I think, in our spiritual lives to wonder at the miracles that God creates in our world through prayer, that we trust in him and show that trust in him through the intercession of the saints. But I really wanted to explore what holiness would just look like on a daily basis that sends these people to heaven to then intercede for us.
Well, how is this film accessible? Can you watch it online, or can you get a copy of it to play at your church, or how's it work?
It's available online through Formed, which is a project of the Augustine Institute, a Catholic streaming platform. So they have all kinds of incredible Catholic content on Formed, which you can find at formed.org. And it includes our Based on a True Saint series. This documentary on Carlo is the latest installment of that.
Emily Mentock, executive producer of The Boy from Milan. Hey, thanks very much for telling us about this. It sounds like it would be a really interesting and revealing kind of presentation.
Yes, I hope that, different families and parishes can watch the documentary. Carlo is so appealing to young people especially, and I think that we present a hopefully compelling case for inspiring people to continue to pursue holiness in their lives based on his example.
Be with us next time when we explore other aspects of religious communication and look deeper into the great Christian heritage of free expression. Free Expression with Bill Kassel is a production of Good Shepherd Catholic Radio and Company Publications, where good books, good music, and good radio are always good company. Dan Curris provided technical assistance. Theme and incidental music are by Dan Adam. The program was produced and directed by Bill Kassel. This is Good Shepherd Catholic Radio.